So Mr. Puri is now going to get tired of me since we've interviewed you many times. I have done this now for 2-3 times in succession. But there's so much to talk about, Mr. Puri, and not just about ITC or CII, but about the India aspiration, which is actually the point of discussion this evening. India at 100, India 2047 is essentially the subject matter of our evening here. But let's start with something which is more recent, the union budget. Now, the budget is seen as having laid the foundation for some things which can be then taken forward over the next few years. What is your sense from an industry perch of how the budget has managed to do this, and what are the things you think the budget helps building on?
So, if you look at what's happening in India today, first of all, let me say always a pleasure to be engaging with you. Yeah. It is very well, I think, addressed what I call the trinity of priorities in India. So we do need inclusive growth. We need to invest for that. I think that's very much visible. 2 is we need to address the issue of the climate emergency. There are steps for that clearly visible in the budget. And we need to do it within the fiscal glide path for getting macro stability. I think all of these are well addressed. And, what is interesting is that in India's growth model, you see, most economies that have grown and come to the status of being developed economies have grown in a fashion with higher energy intensity.
That's right.
India has a unique challenge of charting this growth, which is going to be low carbon. That's very, very interesting. And I find the budget has addressed this in multiple dimensions. There is this piece on, infrastructure that continues to be under focus. It's the public infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, which besides creating growth is also making the economy competitive. The investment in digital infrastructure is continuing. We know what UPI has done. And now there are other initiatives that are being rolled out. There is this ONDC, there is this India Agri Stack. So all of these can be transformative over a period of time. I think a lot of focus this time on training and this whole issue of employment and employability. A lot of focus on the rural and the agriculture economy. So many positives in the economy, in the budget we've seen. And it's really, I think, it's like building on the path that was set in earlier budgets and building on the path, taking the next steps so that the growth is sustained and we subsequently, take it to the next level of growth.
So the subject of this particular discussion between us, Mr. Puri, is a new growth code for India Inc. Now, you represent one of the country's foremost corporations, a company which is truly one of India's first true multinationals in that sense. What do you think Indian industry needs to really do in terms of becoming truly powering that Indian global ambition of, by 2047, where we will be as a developed nation, the Viksit Bharat dream? How do you think corporate India can truly power this? Because so far, even the economic survey mentions that the private sector really needs to come forward and participate in that entire endeavor.
Okay, as I mentioned earlier, the economy is doing well today. And it is doing well, I think, on one hand, very clearly on account of good, purposeful policy interventions. And I think also India Inc. is partnering the growth. The investment as a percentage of GDP, private investment, is higher than pre-COVID levels. The investments are happening, jobs are getting created. There's no doubt about it. Of course, to get to our ambition of Viksit Bharat, I think the strong trajectory needs to continue. The trajectory on livelihood creation needs to get stronger. So these are areas where enterprises as large economic organs of society needs to partner the government in doing so. And And Indian industry is very much, vibrant and keen to be a partner. So what is it that Indian industry needs to do? What we are looking for, the path of the growth has to be, as I said earlier, inclusive and sustainable. And that's the kind of model that India Inc. has to look at itself. And the growth has to be aggressive. It has to be a very high level of growth, similar growth rates sustained up to 2047, which is not easy. It's there. So it requires all components of the economy, agriculture, services, manufacturing, large enterprises, small enterprises. I think all of them have to fire. And equally, we not only need to develop capacity to serve Indian markets, but we need to be a bigger player in global markets. We're just 1.8% of global trade. So we need to. So therefore, if we are to achieve this, what is it that India Inc. needs to do? So let me just talk about 3 or 4 quick points quickly. One is, I think it's important for inclusive growth and sustainable growth that this whole idea of stakeholder value is taken as part of the DNA of an organization, is taken as part of the core of corporate strategy. It has to sharply move away from mere simplistic shareholder value. And the strategy has to simultaneously create, and this is something in ITC we've practiced for 2.5 decades, not only economic value, but social capital and environmental capital. And there is no contradiction. As an enterprise, we've become carbon positive, water positive, solid waste recycling positive. And I think we have happy shareholders also. It's not that one has been, compromised for the other. It's not there. So that, I think, element has to find itself. And when we are talking about this whole strategy, we are also saying, in ITC actually we call it responsible competitiveness. And competitiveness at a very extreme level is required. And for that, very clearly, a lot more needs to be done in IP generation, in R&D, because IP and R&D is what will win the future. That is where you can create brands. And brands are what will give you surpluses to share with all stakeholders and to reinvest. So I think dialing up investments in R&D and IP creation, either build it yourself, acquire it, or partner, I think that's very important. The second is extreme competitiveness. And typically we talk of competitiveness at the enterprise level. That's about technology, your systems, your training of people. But I think what is very important is that you are as competitive as your ecosystem, or as less competitive as the weakest link in your ecosystem. So large corporates have to, develop a large and vibrant ecosystem. And there are great examples, like the auto industry. It's a great example. And once you develop a large and vibrant ecosystem, you are developing MSMEs. MSMEs not only for yourself, but you are also creating a vibrant MSME sector in the economy. That's a powerhouse of job creation for partnering export trades and so on and so forth. In ITC, we work, for example, with 6,000 MSMEs and different ways of supporting them depending on the needs. And the third, I think, very important for us is to look at the amount of value addition in the economy. We have to, if we continue to import everything and assemble, we are not going to create a lot of value in the economy. Of course, it's a journey. And I'm happy to see in sectors like auto, it has progressed. There are many more sectors, there's an opportunity. We in ITC do it very consciously. And today, over 90% of our value addition actually is in the Indian economy, because we develop our ecosystem. And that has an advantage today in today's world, because my supply chains, value chains become resilient, especially in the disturbed geopolitical situation today. I think these would be, in my mind, 3 or 4 very important things that India Inc. needs to incorporate. And if I was to summarize it, it's really about responsible competitiveness. It's about globalization. These elements would give you opportunity to grow. And the last is about partnerships, because the problems of tomorrow or even today cannot be solved in isolation. You will have to partner society, governments, other technology providers and create the solution.
Very important 3 or 4 points you mentioned, Mr. Puri. I want to ask you first about this whole point of extreme competitiveness, which you mentioned. In not very long ago, a few years ago, the Indian industry, big Indian companies used to be very, very active in acquisitions overseas. Then there was a lull. Some of these acquisitions were then questioned, and some companies also fell by the wayside. Today you have, again, in a sense, a kind of a resurgence. We've just seen, Mr. Sunil Mittal acquiring a stake in a UK, in BT. And that was, in a sense, coming back of a large company, a large conglomerate coming back and acquiring a stake overseas. Where do you see this whole acquisitive hunger of India Inc. going forward and powering this growth? Because you mentioned global.
Yeah. So it's a very, very, very good question. So I think being part of or increasing our participation in global trade means that we have to participate in global value chains. 70% of global trade is global value chains. Now this can be done through acquisitions. It can be done through partnerships for technology or market access, and it can also be done on a build model. I think all three models have to be deployed depending on the situation and the case. And I think today, given the developments that have happened in the Indian corporate sector, and with the macros being good in India and better balance sheets, better access to funding, all of that, and Indian Inc. is also far more competitive and far more advanced than they were earlier. I think it's the platform is very well set for India to have a greater play in global value chains through any of these three means. I think one of the very important enablers, of course, is, and that's something I think the government is also very aggressively pushing, is the signing of FTAs, right. because those becomes impediments if you are not to participate in a global value chain, if you are unfavorably placed vis-a-vis tariffs are concerned. So I certainly see more and more of this happening.
The other point you mentioned, Mr. Puri, is that of value addition. How much of value addition is really happening within the country? I am now, tempted to ask you, therefore, about the PLI scheme. Now, in the PLI scheme, there are certain sectors which have seen a lot of activity, for instance, mobile telephones, etc. But it's not really percolated to many other sectors. Would you like a broader review of the PLI scheme from the government side, with more and more job creating and value adding sectors added, for instance?
Yeah, I think the PLI at an overall level, I think, has worked well. You're seeing investments, you're seeing jobs. Electronics is a great example. I think we certainly need to use that platform now to take it to the next level of greater value addition in the economy. And what I would like to really see going forward is, because India also needs to generate livelihoods at scale, and I would say livelihood at scale and also improve farmer incomes. Both have to happen. So as far as livelihood at scale is concerned, we really need to press the pedal on sectors that are heavily indexed on labor. Right. Where labor to capital ratio is much more is higher. Sectors like toys, apparel, footwear, even tourism, which is also seeing buoyancy today. Yes. And food processing, which is also an area under PLI. So these are some sectors that are labor intensive, and I think these are the sectors that certainly require more impetus to be able to take it to the next level. And I think from a policy perspective, there are also certain enablers from the next set of next generation reforms, the factor reforms. All of them actually fall, most of them rather fall at the, at the state level. I think some of these are also going to improve the competitiveness of the economy, and therefore some of these sectors will also get impetus through some of these factor reforms besides the PLI schemes.
In a conversation with you, Mr. Puri, we cannot help but ask about consumption, which is the sort of pet problem which India has faced for some time now. Of late, rural consumption has seen an uptick, and FMCG companies like yours has also have observed it. What is your sense? And IMF has also made a comment on consumption coming back in India. What is your sense about where consumption is headed? Do you see this as a sort of sustainable increase, or do you think there's still time to wait and watch?
Okay, let me start by saying, in the context of the challenges on consumption the world is facing, and even the region is facing. And I have had occasion to look at data on consumption in some markets that are proximal. Now, in many cases, it's under much severe stress. There is a shrinkage now trying to get back to pre-COVID levels. Compared to that, we are today debating the quantum of growth.
True.
So we are far ahead. And I think that we are on the right trajectory because investment is happening in the economy, jobs are getting created, and it's setting in place that virtuous cycle. And over passage of time, as the cumulative effect of all these comes, I think consumption is bound to pick up. The other factor to remember is that one of the reasons why rural has been impacted is that the weather has been very unkind, and rural economy is heavily indexed to the weather. Now we are seeing a favorable situation as far as weather is concerned for this crop, and hopefully, we will see better situation going forward, and all these augurs well for consumption. So we are seeing an improved trajectory, but I think some of these factors will make it better. What I, however, want to say is that to build resilience what is important is one is of course what we are seeing now. How do we really build resilience in the rural economy and create a thriving rural economy that will actually have a more sustained trajectory and a far more robust trajectory on consumption? I think we need to address this issue of building resilience in agriculture. Because extreme weather events are here to stay. Weathers will keep on fluctuating, and there are experiments done, and I can tell you that, not experiments, actually large-scale deployment being done. We have in ITC what is called the Climate Smart Agriculture Program, started several years back. Now 70% of the districts which we started earlier are in high resilience and high yield, where GHG emissions have reduced up to 60%, and farmer incomes have improved from 60 to 90%.
And what exactly does that segment do?
Well, it's a package of practices, agronomic practices, the right varietals, and so on and so forth.
So you're saying that if you do that, if companies look at such smart agricultural projects, it can make a difference.
It can make a difference. And the second thing I think is required for the rural economy, because we have large numbers there. There has to be income diversification also. So one of the things is also to press the pedal as far as skilling is concerned or social infrastructure is concerned on rural India. And given the better physical and digital connectivity, I think I think the time is now right to visualize certain integrated rural development hubs around a cluster of villages. When somebody in the village has to come to a town to access services, whether it's education, skilling or health, is expensive. He has to stay there. If it's a hub, he can, for example, travel during the day, go back in the evening. So we need to create some models like that will empower the rural economy, maybe also educate them on entrepreneurship. So micro enterprise can also thrive. And if you look at farming, for example, it's an area where a lot of technology is coming in. A lot of agri-tech solutions are there. And government is also promoting drones, for example. We have this Drone Didi program. But there are many such solutions available, and each farmer cannot afford it. So can we visualize micro enterprises which will have farming as a service? So some of those, models have to come in to create a thriving rural economy.
You mentioned, before we wind up this discussion, Mr. Puri, you mentioned extreme weather events. Of course, that's a critical area. And earlier in the evening, we had a discussion on climate change and, the entire green transition. What do you see as the critical challenge in India achieving this? Because you are CII as well as ITC is deeply entrenched in studies of this sort. So what are the critical challenges? Because there are huge challenges both in terms of funding and real challenges on the ground.
Absolutely. I think, first of all, let me say that today there are fair bit of economically viable solutions. And first of all, there is a great opportunity for us to implement at scale some of those viable solutions, embrace it. Of course, there is this piece that there are areas where viable solutions are not there, carbon capture, storage, and so on and so forth, hard to abate sectors. So industry needs to develop those solutions, sometimes in partnership with the government, sometimes on their own. And the third piece that we need to look at is really the piece on adaptation. Because extreme weather events will multiply. The world is going to get hotter before it gets cool. Cooling will be several decades away. So how are you going to thrive in a world that has more floods, more cyclones, more droughts? Like I spoke about agriculture resilience, we need to look at resilience of urban infrastructure. Weather rains are changing. We see what happens in Delhi. So how do we deal with adaptation? And there are solutions for that. I think that's a pressing need at the moment. How are we going to create water security? We heard Bangalore was in the limelight. Delhi also has its share of challenges. And again, there are solutions. This Gaud river region near Mumbai, it's in near Pune actually. Several years back, it had a negative water balance. And I'm sharing this from our own experience. We worked with stakeholders for 5 years. And after 5 years, it has become a positive water balance. And we are doing it in other areas also. So adaptation is an area that we need to do. We need to create models to be able to forecast climate risks. And we've used AI to forecast climate risk at a decadal level. And based on the risk on a location, you take the corrective action. Now, as far as funding is concerned, yes, there is a challenge of patient or green funding. And that certainly needs to be solved, especially for MSME. And I think there is, in fact, a bigger opportunity to unlock the potential of private capital. Now, private capital can be unlocked by, one hand, removing the frictions in the system so that the viability of investments comes. And second, creating the whole system of incentives and penalties so that the economic viability again comes in and therefore the investments happen. So I would say we have to solve for green financing and through multilateral institutions, blended finance, and at the same time unlock the potential of private capital. Both of these need to be done.
True to tradition, Sanjiv Puri focused with clear solutions to many of the problems. Thank you very much, Mr. Puri, for speaking to us. A big hand for Sanjiv Puri, CIA President and ITC Chair.
Thank you, Saurabh. Thank you very much. Thank you for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Puri. Please be on the stage for a little while, sir. Let me request Mr. Alok Nair, CEO.